Go Big 12 or go home. I'm Brandon Shanahan, joined as always by Midwest broadcasting legend Drew Russell. Drew Russell, it is Sunday as we're recording. We watched some football on Saturday.
We did.
We did.
We did. And boy, the Big 12 just keeps getting weirder and weirder and weirder, Brandon Shanahan. Just when you think you have some type of idea of what's going on, you don't. You have no idea what's going on. And in terms of a multi-bid league for the college football playoff, I can about nearly confidently say now that is pretty much dead. I mean, we can't sugarcoat it. I mean, it was just a violent late night game last night, and Kansas Jayhawk football continues to be the grim reaper of just in general opportunities for the rest of the conference of being a multi-bid league. What a disaster.
Yeah, just want to send some congratulations to the SEC. The worst that the conference has looked in 20 years, and now they're posed for a 5-bid league because Jalen Daniels has suddenly figured it out, and Kansas has suddenly figured it out just in time to knock off Iowa State and Brigham Young University. And single-handedly ruining the league's multi-team bid. So shout out Kansas for ruining Big 12 football.
Classic Kansas, right? I mean, that's, if they usually are just the cellar dweller, they were playing their role like old times this year. And then Brandon Shanahan, things just completely turned around. So pretty wild when you just look at just Jayhawk football in general and what they pulled off last night. I mean, seriously. And for BYU, they've been kind of living by the hair of their chinny chin throughout the season. And they finally couldn't make it, Brandon Shanahan, unfortunately.
So now that the Big 12 doesn't have a real path for multi-bids, what are you rooting for over the next couple of weeks? What do you want to see out of this conference? How do you want it to finish?
Well, I think it's going to finish with chaos. I think the number one thing I'm keeping an eye on, of course, Iowa State football. They're 8-2, Brandon. They've never had a 10-win season. If they win their next 2 games, that's a confirmed 10-win season. That would be pretty special to me personally. So that's something to keep an eye on. Look, pretty simple on the Big 12 championship game. If BYU and Colorado win their last 2, they're confirmed in. But if they don't, Brandon Shanahan, all of a sudden we've got some interesting tiebreaker scenarios with BYU. Arizona State still has a potential look at that Big 12 championship game. Iowa State also in there as well. K-State losing yesterday was a bit of a surprise. Big shout out to Arizona State. That was quite a win for them, which we'll dig into in just a little bit. So, Brandon Shanahan, just insane. I think just insane in terms of just kind of everything that was going on. And I think more chaos, though. I want more chaos, right? Why not at this point? We're going to embrace it. And at this point, it's a 1-bid league. So let's just get nuts.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at. Is, of course, this entire season I'm coming up with these scenarios of, well, here's how the Big 12 can actually get 3 teams in. Okay, well, now the Big 12 still has a path for 2 teams, and now it's a champion. By the way, that champion's not going to finish in the top 4, almost certainly.
That's
Boise State takes over.
That's confirmed, yeah. Yep.
Well, okay, I'll get into that in a second. But yeah, at this point, I'm just kind of rooting for chaos. BYU gets Arizona State and Houston. Arizona State, watch out, dude! What the hell is going on in Tempe? Arizona State's on fire.
8-2, Brandon. Pretty amazing.
Unreal.
Amazing. Yeah.
I mean, really beat down Kansas State. Of course, we'll talk that game here soon. But I think that's just kind of what I'm rooting for. I'm really hoping to muck things up. Of course, BYU and Colorado still on the inside path. Colorado 2 seemingly easy games to wrap up the year. So I doubt that they'll stumble. I would appreciate if they did, because that, obviously feeds into this. Because I mean, boy, if you can get 4 teams with 2 losses, how fun would that be?
That'd be a blast. I mean, holy cow. That'd be tiebreaker chaos right there, Brandon. And it's not impossible. I mean, I think when you look at just the schedules the rest of the way, I think Colorado, I kind of like how their schedule plays out, but they're playing the Grim Reaper next week in Kansas on the road. That's going to be all of a sudden a very intriguing football game. And then a very winnable home game against Oklahoma State. But, I mean, who knows right now, Brandon? Because KU football might be the hottest team in the conference. And then BYU, this is a huge game. They got to go to Arizona State next week, Brandon, which that is all of a sudden massive game. If Arizona State wins that, they have that tiebreaker, and BYU is completely. I mean, Arizona State's got a legitimate look at a Big 12 championship game. So, again, I mean, who on earth would have been expecting to, say Arizona State and Big 12 championship game coming into the season, considering where their status was as a team in the preseason poll? But that just shows where we're at right now.
Can you imagine if I sat you down in August and be like, here's what's going to happen. It's going to be late November, and BYU and Arizona State are essentially going to play a Big 12 championship semifinal game to see who takes on Colorado in the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't believe it, right? I mean, seriously, that's just sounded like in August I would have said, no, that's just loony land. There's no way that's real. Yeah, but here we are. Yeah, not Looney Tunes, Looney Land. So
unbelievable stuff. So how the seeding plays out, I think is going to be interesting because I think I got to imagine there's an ACC podcast just like ours that are kind of having the same conversation. It's like, well, fuck, everything's falling apart. We're hoping that SMU and Miami, figure it out down the stretch. But did Clemson ended up winning that game yesterday, didn't they?
Against Pitt? Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
Okay.
Yep, they did. Yep.
Okay, I thought I saw that late. But yeah, if you're looking at it from the sense of seeding wise, I probably the Big Ten winner finishes one, whether that's Oregon or Ohio State or Indiana. Watch out for Indiana. And then the SEC champion at 2. Does the Big 12 get any credit for Texas going in and dominating the SEC year one? I think they should get a little bit.
Maybe, Brandon, but unfortunately he had to renounce them. We had to renounce them back in June and July and say we're not dealing with them anymore. But yeah, Texas, I mean, boy, they have just been thriving in the SEC. Life has been good for them in the SEC. Better than them in the Big 12, frankly, their last few years in the conference. So it is maybe the Big 12 did build a Brandon Shanahan. Maybe you're onto something.
Absolutely right. And I mean, if you look at the last 15 years, Texas is about to have as many SEC championships as Big 12 championships, just to put that in perspective. But to Texas or whoever wins that SEC title game finishes 2. I have a real hard time putting a good case together for anybody other than Boise State next. I think maybe if Miami wins out, they might get the nod at 3. But I have a hard time imagining. I guess I don't know what the path is for the Big 12 to finish in the top 4 without some help from the ACC. I mean, if Miami stumbles late and then they're a 2-loss champion and BYU wins, or if SMU wins, then you have that head-to-head if BYU's there. And then how do you evaluate college? I don't know what the path is for the Big 12 to get that bye, which feels crazy. It feels like a crazy thing to be talking about.
Well, first off, I feel like it's like one of those like Matrix things where you have all just these like webs and angles in my brain right now, hearing all these different scenarios, Brandon. I think, again, like, at large teams, I mean, it's going to be all Big Ten SEC. I think we know that, Brandon Shanahan. Of course, Big 12 will get their bye, just guaranteed if you're the conference champion. That's guaranteed. And the ACC too. So Big 12 is guaranteed a quarterfinal game. That's confirmed. But in terms of just, looking at Texas, It has been amazing to see what Texas has been able to put together. And they were strong in their final season in the Big 12. They made the college football
Yeah,
playoff last year for a reason.
for sure.
They've parlayed it into what has been a really successful run. And funny enough, their Red River rival, Oklahoma, has struggled with their adjustment to the SEC. They lost Lincoln Riley a couple of years ago. They thought the sky is falling. Life is never going to be the same. And, they have kind of struggled a little bit of making that adjustment in the conference and, I think playing to the regular Oklahoma expectations. So, yeah, it has been kind of interesting, Brandon, just how that adjustment's been made for those two teams to a new conference.
Let me throw this scenario out to you, Drew Russell. So the Big Ten plays out somewhat predictably. It could really go. Whoever wins that league is not number one. The SEC, as we said, finishes 2, whatever. What if Army goes and beats Notre Dame on Saturday? They're undefeated. And then in this scenario, for the Big 12 agenda, as BYU wins out, they beat Colorado in the Big 12 championship. SMU wins out, they beat Miami in the ACC championship. Does the ACC get 0 teams in? Because you're looking at probably 2 group of 5 teams ranked ahead of SMU, and BYU has the head-to-head over BYU, which we rarely get in this kind of scenario. So that has to be valued. It was valued last year with Texas over Alabama. Do they? I mean, they might get an at-large bid, but they certainly don't get that top 5 auto bid.
Yeah, it's not impossible, is it? It's not crazy now that you're saying it, right? I mean, no, you're dead right, Brandon Shanahan. It is not even remotely impossible. So when you do put it like that, you might, yeah, because SMU, I mean, that BYU win, we've talked about it 40,000 times on this podcast. What a win back in September to take out SMU. It's completely changed the complexion of kind of that Big 12 ACC dynamic. And it's one that's going to continue to loom large, I think, all the way through really that final seeding selection show in December.
Or I think the more realistic, because now I'm just trying to figure out ways to keep the ACC out. Because it feels like the Big 12 and the ACC are generally on the same tier as far as power conferences go. So any opportunity the Big 12 can get an edge there, win for me. Clemson loses to South Carolina the last week of the season. So now they're 3 wins or 3 losses, 2 of them out of conference. So then they still have a path to the ACC championship game. I don't know what those tiebreakers look like. But they get in and they win the conference. They're 10-3.
Yeah.
I mean, to that same kind of scenario, they're not getting the top 5 bid over an undefeated Army, a 1-loss Boise State team to Oregon, and the Heisman front runner, and then, of course, the big bad Big Ten and SEC. They're not getting that bid. They're not getting over even an 11-2 Colorado team or a 12-1 BYU team or even an Arizona State team if they run the table. I think that's the scenario where the ACC gets 0 teams in the college football playoff.
That is a scenario. I mean, it's unlikely. I still think Miami takes care of their business, Brandon, ultimately. And
I think so, too.
I want to make that pretty clear. But that's what makes this 12-team playoff more interesting and more fun is that you do get these bizarro-type scenarios that just frankly wouldn't exist with the 4-team playoff or even the BCS-era championship playoff as well, which I still think we should bring back the computer, Brandon. I still think the computer should determine the 12-team playoff. That would make people real happy.
That was never the issue, Drew Russell. That was almost never the issue.
The computer?
Yeah, almost never the issue. And then the BCS system was fairly fine because you have so many data points because you have the computer, right, of course, but then you factor in the AP and the coaches poll for people that are, I mean, that's probably 40, 50, 60 data points just between those 2 polls. But and now it's 12 university administrators who decide the college football playoff. Now there's a Twitter account that I follow that that kind of puts together what the BCS would look like. And it's interesting because it is generally, oddly enough, it's the first 9 years of the college football playoff. They matched up perfectly. The top four in the what the BCS would have been versus the top four in the college football playoff, exactly the same. I think they split hairs sometimes at 5 and 6, but nonetheless, last year, however, the BCS had Florida State in over, I think, Texas. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, the BCS polling was never the issue. The BCS rankings were never the issue. Of course, it just gets muddy when you're picking two teams from several quality contenders.
Right. Exactly, Brandon Shanahan. I think that's I like the term muddy because we don't have with this 12-team playoff, and since we have these mega conferences that are so difficult to determine just who are the teams going to be playing for a conference championship. I mean, it used to be very easy in every conference. I mean, SEC was just who wins the West, who wins the East. Bam, done. Same
Dang.
with ACC. They had their two divisions, Coastal and I think division, like Coastal and whatever. Boom, done. Big 12, every team played each other once.
Easy.
Top two, we had
You get a head-to-head every time.
Pac-12 had North and South. Big Ten had East and West, or Legends and Leaders. Rest in peace to Legends and Leaders. Those were tough things, Brandon Shanahan. Those were hyper tough things. So, I mean, we don't have that anymore. So it is more difficult to determine those conference champions for who's going to be playing in it. And then, obviously, if you're a champion, you get that bid. So, fascinating era we live in, Brandon Shanahan. Like, it really is. Like, just this whole thing. And we only have 2 weeks left in the regular season, which is hard to believe. And then we have the postseason coming up in the near future as well. So, I mean, we're playing playoff football at this time next month.
Unbelievable
It's exciting.
stuff.
It's exciting stuff.